is Nate. I work for Tight Lines Fly Fishing Company out of De Pere there. Some of my information here is on the bottom of the screen if anybody wants to take that down, or Nate is recording this. So at the end, I'll also have some of that information up. If anybody does have any questions or anything like that, I'll stick around for a little bit at the end. Otherwise, you can certainly feel free to email me. Some of you have contacted me in the past through Instagram and just shot me a direct message there. I've also got my phone number that I'll throw up at the end of the show. This presentation is going to be Beyond the Bank. Basically, I want to discuss how to target river smallmouth, which, we have an absolute gold mine abundance of here in the northeast part of the state and really the central state, northwest part of the state, really all over the upper Midwest, and how to target those fish when conditions are less than ideal. A lot of the questions that I get from folks, whether it's email, social media, whatever, is really kind of centers around, how to catch these fish when the conditions suck, for lack of better terms, when it's not easy and when they're not sitting on a grassy bank, smashing poppers with reckless abandon, which is, how we all would love to fish them. It would make my job a heck of a lot easier. But I really wish that we had a little bit more time tonight. As I started kind of throwing this presentation together, one of the things that I like to do is kind of lay out my chapters that I want to cover, the key elements, and then kind of start filling in the peripheral information after that. And one of the things I realized was, if I was going to cover all of the adverse conditions that a smallmouth angler might encounter and how to counter those, that it was going to take me a half of a day. So really what I kind of had to narrow it down to is a couple relevant conditions: high water, low water, and we'll get into those in a moment. One of the things I just kind of wanted to point out here is that before I get going, there's more information out there right now than there's ever been before. The warm water game has really just erupted in the past handful of years, and there's a plethora of knowledge that's out there to us as anglers, and a lot of it is free. This stuff, information that took us as guides and as regular anglers years and years and years of getting our butts kicked on the water and, really not knowing what the hell we're doing out there. And there just wasn't a lot of this information around. So, feel free to soak that stuff up, take advantage of it. There's a ton of podcasts out there. There's websites out there. Again, if anybody wants any particulars on these, certainly shoot me a message and I can get you some of the good ones. E-zines, books, social media. That's a great resource. You might have to pick through some of the stuff, and you'll recognize the good stuff versus the not so good stuff pretty easily. But I remember when I first started fishing smallmouth bass, and I grew up in west central Wisconsin, just kind of right at the confluence of the St. Croix and the Mississippi, in that Hudson River Falls area. And I fished a ton on the Willow, on the St. Croix itself, on the Mississippi, on the lower reaches of the Apple and stuff like that. And there was just no information out there. And I remember every once in a great while in Fly Fisherman magazine or something, you would see an article on smallmouth, and it would be by one of the usual suspects, whether it was, a Harry Murray or a Clouser or Whitlock or something like that. And it was just, I remember when I saw him, I would always be shocked, because here's this magazine that is always generally been nothing but trout. Every once in a while, there'd be a saltwater article. And when there was a warm water article, it was really exciting. And now fast forward, 20, 25 years, I'm talking, which is not really a long time in the scope of fly fishing. There is, almost more knowledge out there than we can pick through. So, really take advantage of that and use it, because there's just a ton of good stuff out there. If the past 5 to 10 years have really shown us anything, it's that, we need to be prepared as anglers to face and embrace adverse weather and water conditions. Stability has become a little more than, an unfamiliar adjective. It seems like every couple of years we're seeing record-breaking highs and record-breaking lows on our rivers. And it's really forcing us to grow and adapt as anglers. And that's what I'm going to focus on in this talk, is the extreme water conditions that we're being faced with more and more often, the highs and the lows. And, the fish aren't going anywhere. So They're still there. They're still doing their fish things. They're eating, they're surviving, they're spawning, stuff like that. And we as anglers, are not going to stop chasing them. At least I'm not. So, here's a picture right here real quick of one of my more local rivers. And this is what it looked like 3 years ago, and every bend that I seemed to go around was just completely foreign to me. It was as low as I'd ever seen. It was a great learning resource for me, and I'll speak on that just a little bit more here. But yeah, it's been a wild time. Just a few key bullet points here that I want to emphasize that you can really apply to all of these challenging conditions that I'm going to mention. Number one is be flexible. If you know you're going to go in to a situation and possibly face some type of unusual water condition or something like that, be flexible, be ready to adapt and move, and that might just be as simple as carrying, an intermediate line or a sinking line or sink tips, multiple flies, stuff like that, and just really be willing to kind of get outside of that comfort zone. Number two, spend time in the suck. And this is one of those things that, like, as instructors, when we're talking to people about becoming better fly casters, is don't always go out and cast when it's 72 degrees and the humidity is pleasant and the winds are really calm. I mean, that will teach you the basics, but it's not going to force you to get better. So, if you look at the hydrograph and your local stream or river is, really low, or it's, on the high side, don't just say, well, I'm gonna tie flies today, or I'm gonna clean the gutters out or something like that. Spend time out in those crappy conditions, because they will teach you things. You can learn a lot from them, and they'll make you better angler. And forget what you know, and this is one that, all of us, we kind of get that comfort zone that we cultivate over a lot of years of doing this, the fishing thing. And, that's where we want to be. That's where we want to stay. And, get outside of that a little bit, and try different flies, try different things, and adapt. So one of the first conditions that we encounter for the year is high water. And this is generally brought on by spring rains, snow melt on rivers that have hydro dams. It can be dam releases. And when I say high water, we don't necessarily have to think of, for the sake of this conversation here we're having tonight, a situation like you see right here in front of you on your screen, which is, a big river system, big dangerous water. High can be a relative term. On some of the small waters I fish, high might only mean, a vertical change of maybe 6 inches. But it does completely change the hydrology of the stream, and it completely changes where those fish sit. And we have to learn about why they move to these different areas in order for us to target them successfully when we have these situations. A couple of bullet points here about high water. Number one, and I always feel it responsible to mention this, but is safety. And all of you probably know these things, but I'm going to mention it anyways. Carry wading staff with you if you have to. Rock a PFD. They make some amazing PFDs now. And I grew up with the giant orange ones that when my dad put them around my head, I looked like I was paralyzed. I couldn't turn my neck or anything. But they got the new ones now, that are the CO2 operated ones that, you can put a jacket over them, and it's not going to affect the ability for that thing to work properly, but you're not going to know it's there and it's comfortable. Good footwear. Stuff that's gives you good traction, good bite on the riverbed, whether that's studs or sticky rubber. Felt, if you're going to stay local and not travel a lot and take care of it when you're done, can be great. And carry a cell phone, and that's an important one that, always bears mentioning. As much as sometimes we want to throw those things out the window, they can be a lifesaver, and if you find yourself wading across a river and you get to the other side and the river comes up really rapidly, you have no way off of it. You can always call somebody and, get some assistance, find your way out of there. If you have a little bit of internet connectivity, you can certainly use the map situation to get you out of there. So cell phone, keep it in a plastic bag, keep it waterproof, can be a very valuable asset, obviously. Second key thing to remember when thinking about high water situations is that smallmouth are not trout. In some ways, they certainly are, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but in other ways, they're not. They don't have the very slender torpedo form body that trout do. And, I can always tell my hardcore trout anglers when we're going down the river, because they see that, big standing water plume coming off of the boulder in the middle of the river that's surrounded by 4,000 CFS, and they they plop that fly right down behind that boulder, expecting to catch a rainbow like they're on the Missouri River or something. And I won't say that there's never a fish there, but I will say that there's rarely fish there. So that's one thing to consider when you're looking at a piece of water that's got a lot of current and a lot of heavy flow going on around it, is that, certainly just remember that they're not trout and they don't always sit in trout spots. High water is generally accompanied by, another thing that we deal with in the spring, and that is dirty or cool water. A lot of our northeast, north central, northwest streams have a very rich riparian barrier. So it's not very often that, just simply runoff from a rain or a storm dirties them significantly. On the smaller systems, certainly it can. But I know like on a lot of our good sized rivers, the Ocontos, the Menominee, the Wisconsin, stuff like that, it takes a heck of a lot of rain and runoff to really dirty them. So that's not something we see a whole lot, but the cool water component is certainly mixed in there with that, especially early on in the season. You're going to want to find the soft water. Again, that kind of hits back on number 2, smallmouth are not trout. And that soft water is going to change as the hydrology changes with the river as it goes up and down. So, I always want to look for those soft water spots, figure out how to get the fly to the fish. And I know that one sounds very obvious and very simple, but when you're considering hydrology and currents that are out of the norm, and maybe a type of fly that you haven't fished before, you might have to get a little bit creative on how to get that fly to the fish, whether that means, in some cases it sounds crazy, but we've even run split shot 12 inches in front of a fly, tying flies in different densities, tying some that are weighted, some that are not, carrying cones that you can just slide right down the leader, right to the nose of a streamer. Super easy, super simple, but can definitely help get that fly down to the fish. And then obviously, the composition of your leader, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, fluorocarbon versus nylon and stuff like that. Number 6, slow down, and that's one that is really, really a tough one for a lot of people. But when that water's high, you often have to work a little bit more meticulously. When the water's cold, you definitely have to work a little bit more meticulously. Slow down, refish things if you have to. And that becomes a tricky ordeal too, because a lot of the times, like on our rivers, if we want to get a fly down to the fish, but the river is moving at a very rapid pace, oftentimes if you slow down too much and make that cast to where you think there's a fish, that current is having an incredible effect on that fly line and oftentimes ripping it out of there. So, just again, kind of thinking about variables and maybe positioning yourself above where you think the fish are instead of more perpendicular, but, really slow down and work those spots very thoroughly. Use an indicator or a sighter. Oftentimes the strikes when the water is kind of high and dirty will be very, very subtle. And a lot of times it's just a little tick at the end of the line. So Rio makes it's basically like the sheath of a fly line. I think it was called like the kahuna or the big kahuna or something like that, but you can slide it right onto a tapered leader, but it gives you that bright little visual spot. I personally like the indicator designed leaders or lines rather, I'm sorry, that the last, 12 to 18 inches of them is like a bright neon orange. I think that's a great target for people to watch while they're working a subsurface fly, to just see that little tick or that little curl of the end of the line. And the other one that I like that I found does not affect the action of the fly, or really even, you don't even notice when you're casting, is the old school kind of butterfly shaped Pulsa stick-on strike indicators. And I put those right over the leader knot. So your transition and your weight coming down the fly line of a fairly aggressive weight forward line, if you put that indicator right there, it's small enough and subtle enough that you're not going to notice any kind of weird hinging or anything like that. You're not even going to notice that it's on there. But I'm amazed. I think I've got my eyes trained well to watch the end of that fly line, but I'm amazed how many more strikes I pick up just having that little bitty sighter on there. Refish spots later. Oftentimes with high water, we've got fish that are moving a lot, especially in the spring of the year. Those fish are migrating, they're dispersing through the river system. And if I fish a really likely spot, and go back and refish it an hour or two later, there can be, 7, a dozen, maybe 15 fish that have moved into that spot in that last hour. So certainly, do not be afraid to refish something if you're really feeling confident about what that spot offers to the fish and to yourself as an angler. When I get to a river that's running higher than normal, one of the first spots I like to look for is a definitive bank. Okay, and I know that this sounds obvious, but it really isn't. When you're searching for that water that isn't moving a lot of the times you're going to end up finding those spots where there is not a definitive bank. And what I mean by that is the river is big, the river's high and plump, and a lot of the times you've got water that might be flowing back into or through trees, beyond willows, stuff like that. Even a creek mouth that's broadened by 300% where it meets the main river just is a really, really tough task to fish. I mean, certainly there will be fish back in those spots because it allows them to get out of the current and into slightly warmer water, but it's really hard to chase them there. I mean, especially with fly gear. I mean, if you had, 80-pound test braid and a soft plastic, you could skip it back behind there. And even then, if you hook a fish in there, it's a tough ask to get it out of there. So I like to find that definitive bank. I want to give those fish a boundary and know that my flies are being seen. High banks like the one that you see right in front of us here in this picture can give you that definitive hard edge. I've caught fish out of people's yards before because a lot of the times those kind of quote unquote manicured yards that are a little bit more consistent kind of give you that edge. And I've caught a fair number of fish right out of those, actually, right out of people's yards. So concentrate on the lazy water. The fish don't want to move hard. We got to remember that these are warm water species. Okay. A trout isn't going to care about holding out in that current if they have to. Certainly they're going to consider their metabolism and their caloric output and stuff like that. But, a smallmouth is a warm water species. So it's going to want to find the warm water, and generally that lazy, slower water is just going to be a little bit less work for them, might even be a little bit warmer and just a much more comfortable area for them to hang out in those high water situations. And areas that get high solar energy are really, really important. Find, a bank structure, something that is an efficient absorber of that solar energy. And, it's whether that's a dark bottom, or just a hard bottom, a rock face, something like that, can all be, very, very good at soaking up that little bit warmer water and keeping those fish happy. This fish right here, actually, if you look at the bank behind Matt right here, I don't know if you guys can see my cursor or not, but this high bank right here is the same one as you see in this previous slide right here. And that fish came after fishing that bank for probably, I'd say 30, 35 minutes. You can see it's early spring behind us. The trees are just starting to bud out and stuff like that. But, the water was barely 50 degrees. It had been cloudy and cool all day. And then we were, maybe 300 or 400 yards from the takeout right here. And, the sun popped out, warmed up that bank a little bit. And we actually dropped the anchor and had a soda and stuff and said, let's just give this a little bit of time. And I think in the last maybe 30 minutes of the day, we pulled about 7 or 8 fish out of just maybe 50 yards of bank right there. And they were all big quality pre-spawn fish, just like the one right there. Another thing that I like to look for and concentrate on are areas where there's a change in bank composition. Those transition areas, I feel like they do a good job of holding fish. Here you can see we've got this transition from a hard bank to a soft bank right there, and then going back from a hard bank to a soft bank there on the back side. And you can look at that and you can say, well, that's a rock face, so that should be good. Not always the case on our rivers. I like those transitions. The area to the left of that kind of central yellow line right there is actually kind of a soft, spongy, almost boggy bank. And then as it comes to that rock face right there, we don't catch actually as many fish off that rock face as people would think. And that's where they always want to go with the fly. But usually it's kind of that corner of that transition above and below that rock face right there. It could be, again, a hard bank to a soft bank. It could be a high bank to a low bank, or even a change just in bankside vegetation, which is oftentimes accompanied with that change in composition, but, willow to grass or shade trees to rock and so on and so forth. So the next area that I like to concentrate on when we get high water is one that you trout anglers out there should all be very familiar with, and that is current breaks and the seams that they create. And here the river is actually moving kind of away from us in this picture. There's a point that I'm standing on when I took this picture here, and you can see the current seam coming off that point right there. The slack water is just kind of in the bottom right corner to the right of the yellow line there. And these are very relevant and worthwhile spots to concentrate on. They'll change, and that's one of the things that with all of these, you get that water that's either rising or falling, and that the hydraulic effect that occurs and stuff like that is going to change from day to day. So these spots, you certainly need to be on your toes and kind of keep abreast of what's going on. Now with these seams, I like to fish these a number of different ways. If we were standing in the position as I am in this, having taken this photo, looking downstream, seam kind of slightly off to our left, just like I would kind of in a trout situation, I'm going to start casting down and across, and I'm going to start fairly short. So if you can see my cursor, probably going to start in this area, move to here, move kind of down that yellow line out to that deadfall out there. And as I'm moving down and across, I'm going to start off with a fairly quick retrieve. Probably going to be a streamer, probably going to start off, as long as that water temperature is 55 degrees or over, probably going to start off with like some type of unweighted bait fish pattern, unweighted minnow. And really, I'm going to do that as kind of a probing technique. I just want to see if there's a fish in there that's really, really active, really, really aggressive, and really wants to come out and smash my fly. From there, I'm going to start moving to kind of a perpendicular position and kind of aim at a 90 at that current seam. Just, again, really all I'm doing there is changing the angle of that fly as the fish is going to see it. So instead of kind of a 45, it's going to be more of a perpendicular shot that I want to show those fish, maybe just enough to change their mind a little bit. And if I really feel confident that there are fish to be caught along that seam or in that slack water right there, I will eventually position myself downstream and cast those flies kind of straight up into the seam, off the seam a little bit, and let them really drop and tumble with the current. Save the slowest presentation for the laziest of fish. It's going to really end up almost being a dead drift as it comes down towards me in the current. Next area that I'm going to look for when the river is high is some type of warm runoff source. And again, these areas that I'm looking for and talking about right now, these are not ranked in any kind of specific order, favorite to least favorite. In order to become, an effective angler when looking at these high water situations, you really have to kind of learn all of these, keep them in your pocket. Right there, the arrow is pointing at our warm runoff source that we have here in this picture. It could be a creek that flows through an open field and just gets a lot of direct sunlight. It could be a creek that flows through, some type of rocky rubble. This particular stream that you're seeing right here, if you look at the forest behind it there, that was clear cut a number of years ago, and that is strictly a runoff stream. So that water as it's coming in is, depending on the main river temperature, usually anywhere from 2 to 6 degrees warmer than the main river channel right there, which can be obviously a huge advantage. Another one is just runoff from city streets. There's a particular stretch of river that I guide and fish a lot that goes through kind of an urban area here in Northeast Wisconsin, and one of the areas that's oftentimes stacked with smallmouth early in the spring are the culverts. And that water that's coming off of those city surfaces, sidewalk, streets, stuff like that, is coming into the water. And I've actually tempted some of that stuff at almost 10 degrees warmer than the main current is. So those areas can be absolutely gold mines early on in the season. And I found 8, 10, 12 fish stacked up at the mouth of a little culvert like that. It feels weird fishing them sometimes. I mean, you kind of feel like going back to when you were a little kid, and just probing around, those kind of urban areas, or, fishing culverts on a stream, that I grew up fishing a stream that was so small it didn't even have a bridge. It flowed through a culvert. And I always used to assume that the biggest, nastiest fish lived hidden back in that culvert. So there's a little bit of familiarity there with that. But yeah, I mean, this is a great area here. And We've got another added bonus here in that, we've got a couple really nice current seams here, highlighted by the yellow lines. There's a current that kind of runs right along the outside of the bank there. And then there's one that's a little bit closer back here to the boat. And you can see that slack water in the middle there. So we've got, a lot of different options for how to approach this. Again, like I would in a spring creek in the driftless area, I'm going to start close. And I'm going to kind of work my way out and not go for that home run shot right away and risk, spooking fish or lining fish right away. So, one of the things that you're going to hear me mention in a boat a lot, if you've ever fished with me in these situations, is, stacking elements or stacking variables. We want to put as many of these positive elements that we can into one spot. And the more of them that you can put together into one spot, the higher your likelihood, plain and simple, of actually catching some fish. So one of my all-time favorites when a river is high is bays, backwaters, and their connectors. And in this situation, the main river is actually out there kind of underneath that pink line that I've got highlighted. And you can kind of see the little bottleneck there. And there is actually current that is going along these yellow areas, pushing towards that bottleneck area out there, towards that choke point. And fish will use these for a lot of different reasons. They'll use them to stage for spawning. They'll use them to actually spawn if the bottom type in there is conducive to it. They use it to feed. They'll use it to rest. They'll use it to warm up. And there's also another big reason that fish love to utilize these bays and backwaters, and that is these guys. It's tough to find a backwater bay on our rivers that isn't crawling with several different frog species. And as most of you know, bass love frogs, and I love casting frogs to bass, so it works out perfectly. Now I'm going to chat just a little bit here, guys, on some of the different flies that I like to use to approach these different situations here that I've talked about, and the coming situation that we're going to go into next, which is low water. But for the sake of high water, these are some of my favorite types of flies. Now, this is another one of these parts of this show where I started adding pictures of all the flies that I liked in high water or dirty water or off color water. And all of a sudden I went, oh my gosh, I've got 36 pictures of flies. So I really cut it down, guys, here to just a handful of my favorite flies, the flies that I have the most faith in for both high water and low water conditions, which we're going to get to in just a little bit here. To be quite honest with you, the more I do this, the more I fish smallmouth, the more I'm convinced that if one of these key types of flies isn't working, then, well, maybe it is a good day to go home and rake the lawn or something like that. So either the fish aren't there or, your conditions are just too extreme. So one of my first go-tos is just the neutrally buoyant bait fish. This is, includes anything in that Murtich family, Bardo minnows, deceiver minnows, Nabby's minnow, EP minnows, anything like that. Anything that kind of hangs in the water column and is neutrally buoyant, isn't heavily weighted. And these can be fished on either an intermediate line or a floating line. I honestly, if I had to pick one, I guess I prefer the latter. And that generally surprises people when the water is high, and particularly if the water is cool as well. A lot of people want to grab that weighted line or intermediate line to try to get that fly down a bit. And a couple things that I've realized: number one, the hydraulic effect on a big fat, intermediate fly line with a, weight forward design is incredible. They definitely are more effective in areas where you truly have slack water, whether it's a bay on a river or in a lake or something like that. But in a river where you've got a fair bit of current, that line isn't doing quite as much for you as you sometimes think that it is. And with the floating line, I like that almost better because I can really slow it down. When that fly and that line hit the water, I can mend and I can really hang that fly in the zone in that little spot and, twitch it a couple times, let it hang. And I just feel like I have way more control over the fly itself. With an intermediate line, certainly you can mend them, but you can really only do it effectively fairly shortly after it hits the water. Anytime much later than that, and you're actually just going to succeed in lifting that fly itself up in the water. I like to run a shorter leader, heavier material. You're going to be casting in towards brush and unknown things in the water that want to snag your line. But also in the springtime, we deal with a lot of pike on our streams, and pike love big flashy minnow patterns. So I like the heavier fluorocarbon, heavier nylon from time to time, gives you a little bit of a fighting chance against the pike. And some of the examples of some of the neutrally buoyant bait fish we use, here's a kind of a red and white version of a Murdich minnow. It's kind of a classic color. This is a pattern that I came up with, the Nabby's minnow. It's just a bunny strip tail, and then there's flared bucktail around the base of that bunny strip to kind of keep that bunny strip from fouling around the hook. And then the head is an EP minnow brush, and then those are actually 3D eyes. They're not just stick-on. So it's a very, very tough, very hard to beat up fly, and has been a good one for me. Another super relevant fly when we're addressing high water situations are the jig type flies. These are relatively new to the fly world. It's kind of sort of our version of the jig and pig. They're very easy to tie, but they can be a challenge to cast. I've been hit in the head by these damn things more times than I care to admit. And oftentimes it has nothing to do with how good a caster is. It's just when that fly comes back on that line and stops, it'll oftentimes shock the line and the rod. And sometimes when it comes past you, that loop is actually inverted, traveling under, the fly will be traveling under the loop. And you got to keep your head up a little bit or down and be careful. You can tie these on a precast jig head. Obviously, we're not using much lead just because it would be too unruly to cast with a fly rod. So a lot of them will be, a tin or some type of alloy. You can use hourglass eyes on a 60 or 90 degree jig hook. You can use lead, tungsten, steel. You can even use a big tungsten bead. I've found enough of those now that they work really well. I like these, and this is kind of an interesting side note sometimes for people. I do prefer these on a lighter wire hook. If any of you have fished with us long enough, you've probably seen a fly called the Menominee mudbug. And that was a fly tied by one of our former guides, Dr. Nelson Ham. And it was a crazy, kind of new fly to us at the time. Nelson was molding these tin jig heads in his garage, and none of us had ever really seen anything like it before. It was fairly similar, actually, to what you see in the picture right here. And one of the things that was unique about it was that it was actually tied on and molded on a fairly light wire hook. And when you're probing the bottom of any of these rivers, you are constantly going to be getting snagged, whether it's on, rocks or wood or whatever. And the unique thing about that light wire is that if your fish a stout enough tippet, which we generally are that time of the year, and just aim the rod tip right at it and pull, a lot of the times that hook would give just enough that fly would pop free. And I remember the first few times it happened to me, I was all bummed because I was like, oh man, I lost one of Nelson's flies. And you'd bring it in and the hook was just opened up just ever so slightly. And you'd take your forceps and kind of bend it back a little bit and cast her back out there. And, I think all of us that guide through tight lines had, versions of the mud bug early on that we probably fished for like a week straight, constantly bending those hooks back and forth, and was always dumbfounded that we never broke the hooks. I mean, I don't know, and I don't know if Nelson would tell me what he was using for hooks, but since then I have definitely made a concerted effort to try to find those lighter wire hooks, which is a challenge. A lot of the jig hooks are tied on very, very heavy, kind of over the top almost stout hooks. So if you can find the lighter wire ones, that's fantastic. So here's a couple different examples of kind of the jig type flies. This one's got the little suede froggy legs on it there, rubber skirt. This one is tied on a 60-degree jig hook with the kind of classic dumbbell or hourglass looking eyes that I mentioned earlier. And certainly, don't be afraid to add things that might give the fly a little more vibration in the water. Stack all the odds that you can in your favor. Here's some that have kind of the twister type tails. The white ones on the left there are kind of a suede material. The pumpkin ones on the right there are actually just a rubber. And we have both of these, I believe, at the fly shop, but super fun flies to tie. If you cast them down and across in the current, they just move like crazy. I've seen guys do the coyote spinner blades on these types of flies. Certainly you can use rattles, use the humor type discs that push a lot of water, give that fly a big sound profile. But really anything, use your imagination. If you're not a purist, you can do a lot of fun stuff with these flies to give fish a better chance of finding them in that higher water column. The fly's actually in the middle right there. My son has fished on an ultralight and caught a whole bunch of sauger and walleye on the Wisconsin River with those. So really fun stuff to do. Another great option in high water is just the deep running minnows. And these, can include clouser minnows, whitlocks, deep sheep, the dungeons, the sparkle minnows, Crelex minnows. Usually they have some kind of cone bead or some type of wire wrap. And they have a very simple, very crude purpose, and that is just to get down to the fly, or to the fish rather, as quick as possible. This one I got a little crazy with here. This is kind of a weird hybrid. It's got a bunny strip tail. It's got some rubber legs on there, a Murtich type head. And then I've actually got wire coming off the jig bend of that hook there with those 3 tungsten beads on there. And that really hopped along the bottom really neat, did not hang up much, which was kind of cool. And again, experiment with these with both a tapered leader and a level fluorocarbon leader. And it's amazing what you'll discover experimenting with those 2 different types of leaders. Many years ago, Tim and I rented a motel pool and shot some underwater footage, and we actually taped a tape measure to the side of the pool underwater. We had underwater camera gear and masks and stuff, and we studied the sink rates of flies on a 9-foot tapered leader versus level fluorocarbon versus on nothing at all. And obviously the fly that was on nothing at all sank the fastest, and the level fluorocarbon wasn't terribly far behind it. You've got less friction going through as it's dropping through the water column. It's not as thick. You're not getting that water resistance on there, but it's also a different density and allowing that fly to get down there faster. But there are also situations where I want that tapered leader. I don't want that fly to necessarily plummet right down to the bottom. Again, high water is a relative term depending on the water that you're in. And, if you're talking about water that's only, maybe 3 feet deep, I don't want, a fly that drops it, 12 inches per second or 8 inches per second or something like that. I know that'd be extreme, but so experiment with the different types of leaders, and you'll get a huge variance in results there. If the high water is accompanied with a bit of color, don't be afraid to embrace the dark side. Use blacks, purples, deep reds, maroons, dark blue. One of the problems with a lot of our bait fish patterns is that their light color allows us to see them, which is great. But it's definitely the way that we've changed and the way that we've gone about selecting flies. It's, flies like the Murtich and the Bardo and stuff have really jaded us and kind of spoiled us. And, we love to see the way that fly is moving and the way that it kicks and the way that it flutters and stuff like that. But that's not always a great thing. Most of us know that, the dark flies offer great silhouettes to the fish. And one of the little cheats that I've done to kind of make these flies a little bit more visible to myself or to my clients is that this is a stack of black Murtiches here that I tied, but you can see the copper that I added into that tail in there. And on a sunny day, adding a little bit of copper or gold, it's not going to make or break the effectiveness of that fly 1 iota, but it's going to allow you to see it a lot better. And one of the new ones that is fairly new on the market, I think maybe 3 or 4 years old, is that Flashabou has started to do a completely opaque white Flashabou. And a couple strands of that on the back of a dark fly is incredible. How much, easier that fly will be to see in the water. So, little things like that just make fishing that fly a little bit easier, a little bit more comfortable. And then one of the last kind of must-have flies, in my opinion, for fishing high water for smallmouth is the diver, large popper, gurgler type flies. These can be fished with amazing results, provided that, the water is warm enough. If the water's super high and 48 degrees, I'm probably not going to grab this fly. But if we're 55, 56 degrees and much over, you guys have driven past those ponds early in the season, like even in March, and heard the frogs out in them. The frogs are out earlier than a lot of people realize. So as soon as you start hearing those suckers, don't be afraid to throw some of these in your smallmouth kit, even if that water is a little bit cool. I like to fish them on a fairly short, fairly stout leader. And I do a lot of my manipulations with the mend. I'll put that fly out there on the water, won't touch it much right away at first, throw that mend into it, get that thing to really kind of dive, get that line set up for the next manipulation. And hopefully a fish nabs it soon. But, you're getting both the advantage of that large profile and that sound to try to locate an active fish. So All right, moving on to the second and probably most common and longest lasting condition that I'm going to discuss here is just low water. I keep in contact with a lot of folks that fish smallmouth a ton and guide smallmouth a ton in Minnesota, Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin. And this is definitely the one condition that seems to not only be occurring frequently, but also giving anglers kind of the most issues and the most problems. And what I mean by that in a nutshell is they can't catch fish in these situations. So hopefully I can shed just a little bit of light on that here tonight and not be too overwhelming with it. It's pretty safe to assume most of the time that low water conditions are often also accompanied by fairly warm water. So for the sake of the rest of this show, we're just going to assume that, our water temperature is probably going to be 60 degrees or over. And a lot of that just kind of makes common sense. A lot of that is just science. The smaller the water column, the less water there is, the less solar energy it takes to warm it up. So again, the dark bottoms, the dark water that we have here in Northeast Wisconsin and across a lot of northern Wisconsin is just a very efficient solar absorber. So a few things to remember when targeting smallmouth in low water. Number one, just approach cautiously. Just don't go barging right in. Again, those of you that have fished trout, that should be a pretty obvious one. Work on your long distance presentation. Work on casting, that little bit bigger fly, whether it's a popper or some type of terrestrial or something like that. Pretty safe to say it's going to be bigger than what you're going to be throwing on, a Spring Creek in Southwest Wisconsin. It's not going to be a size 20 blue winged olive or something like that. It's going to be something that's going to be a little bit more wind resistant. So work on casting that bigger fly at a little bit greater distance. Observe before you attack, before you go barging in. And again, this is something that I remember reading in trout books when I was a little kid. I always, read the stories about the author that would go sit on the riverbank and smoke a cigar or eat a candy bar and watch the pool before he would fish it. And of course, when I was young, I sucked at doing that. I would always want to go diving right in. But as you get older, you kind of realize how advantageous that can be. And one of the beautiful things about smallmouth is that they like to move. They don't always sit in one spot and hold an ambush lie. They're cruising up and down these shorelines looking for food. And if they're moving, you're just going to have a better opportunity, better chance to see them. So sit and watch a spot before you hop right into it. Lengthen your leaders, lighten your flies. Once we get down to that kind of low summertime level, I will often swap out all of my guidelines that I have on my reels and go from those really aggressive weight forward type lines down to a little bit longer taper, more of a trout type of fly line. So watch your wake, that's one, whether you're in a boat, watercraft, wading, whatever. But if you're approaching an area where the water surface is very, very calm, you don't want to go jumping in and pushing, a big wake out in front of you. So one of the really big advantages to seeing and having this really, really low water is that you can use it as a great time to learn. You can look at these situations and say, oh, well, this sucks. And, kind of kick, some dirt and say, oh, I should do something else. It's not like it used to be. I don't remember it being like this, so on and so forth. Or you can use it as an opportunity to learn, and even if that means you go out a couple times and get your butt really kicked, but, you can learn a ton. This little log pile right here was fished by myself and by clients for years. And I could never figure out why my quote unquote lousy casters that couldn't get the fly all the way into the log jam right there were catching the most fish. And it was happening regularly. And I figured that there was something to it. I figured that there was either something under the water or that the fish were aggressive enough that they were just coming all the way out from, the log jam and eating the fly there. And about 7-8 years ago, we had record-breaking low water levels for a number of consecutive days for those respective days in history. And I finally saw this spot and went, duh. I mean, you look and you can see, again, I don't know if you guys can see my cursor here, but, the logs that you've got going here, the wood that you've got going here, the little bit deeper pit kind of right in the center of your screen right there. I mean, there's so much more going on with this spot than I ever realized. I thought it was just the log jam right there. So, again, use this as an opportunity to learn. I promise you'll see stuff that, you never really knew was there before. Here's a little side channel, right here that, I knew that we had a 0% chance to go into it and actually catch fish. And I was right. I mean, there were a handful of 4 to 6 inch long, bass and pike that were swimming around in there and stuff, but it showed me where the water was deepest. And again, you got to imagine this channel with another 2 or 3 feet of water over it. And there was some of those spots that, you see the little bit deeper channel here snaking along the bank, coming into this deeper pool here in the middle, and then finally meeting this deeper current here. And you'll find that you'll have some of these kind of face palm moments where you go, duh, and you caught fish in these certain areas year after year. And now you're kind of getting an opportunity to see why. So, take pictures, and study these areas, when you get home, and you'll be able to apply it to when the water is back up at a higher normal level. The next very worthwhile area that I like to focus on in really low water are transitions. And these transitions can be, again, sun to shade, a light bottom to a dark bottom, a hard to a soft bottom, current to slack, anywhere that there's a change. And this is one thing that I have pounded into clients' heads, into my kids' heads, into any young children that I've taught how to fish, not even considering fly fishing, just fishing, is freshwater fish love transitions. Okay. And again, it can be as simple as a drop off or a shadow line or something, but any place where it goes from one variable to another. I really like this particular shot right here because it shows that these transitions, and again, in this case, it's just a simple drop off from a ledge, but they don't always mirror the bank line. You can see on the bank here, you actually have this kind of subtle indent in the bank. And if you look at this drop off on the edge of this flat here, this actually bulges out a little bit. So kind of getting an elevated look at some of these spots and kind of learning where these transitions occur. You can see kind of the start over here too of another little flat that comes up in here. So you got your deepest water running right through here. All of these edges, all of these transitions can be really, really key areas. This is a piece of water right here that has given up an absolute pile of fish to me the past several springs. And we've got a number of transitions occurring here. The current is moving along the arrow here from left to right. Working out from the bank, we've got a mid-depth flat in there, and that actually has, I would call it a gravel to small stone bottom in there. And then we come out and we meet the sand line out here. And just on the other side of this sandbar is the deep trough. This spot has got a ton going on in it. There's a reason why the fish are always here. And there's, changes from year to year happen in these spots. Those sandbars get shoved around and stuff a little bit by ice shelves. But for the most part, areas that have multiple transitions will from year to year. Again, I'm going to fish these spots similar to where, what I mentioned with the seam. If the boat was positioned here in the corner, I'm going to start fairly short, kind of going to that sandbar, bringing it back to myself each time. Then I'm going to either wade over or slide the boat over and stay just on this side of the sandbar and cast to that mid-depth flat to the shore if I can reach it, which would be perfect, and bring that fly back over that transition. Sometimes the fish that are sitting right along this edge in here, this drop off, like to see that fly coming over their head off that flat and over that transition, as opposed to just landing right in front of them and kind of getting pulled away from them. So super fishy spot here with a lot of stuff going on, a lot of different transitions happening. Next one, that's a great one. I don't know why my iCloud is being mad at me. Sorry for that pop up there. Submergent vegetation is another low water, quote unquote must have. As the rivers start to drop from the high water of the spring and cool water, and they start to warm up and stuff a little bit, this aquatic vegetation starts to grow up. Obviously, these areas are good for a number of reasons, namely providing food and cover to the fish. A lot of these areas actually aren't very good until this grass and weed starts to grow up and kind of thicken in. When this happens, it obviously attracts, a lot of insect life and bait fish. It's just super fishy types of spots. If you ever anchor over or wade through these spots and just kind of sit and watch, it's amazing what lives in them. This stuff is like a magnet for life. It brings in bait fish, and damsel and dragon nymphs are cruising around in there. And they're not all created equal. I definitely like, what you see here in this picture and in the last slide, the kind of more aquatic grasses as opposed to the thicker, kind of scummier type of weeds. Generally, I avoid that stuff. So the next thing that, you're going to encounter as we get into these really, really low water situations is you're going to find that the hydrology of a shoreline will change. This is a particular piece of water here that if we look at this and we're looking upstream, so if you can imagine the water's flowing at us in this picture, a month earlier, this was just a big, steady, nearly constant sheet of water that was kind of pushing down this bank. And as it really, really dropped throughout the year, it changed. The little rocky points that you can see here and here and here and up here kind of bump that water out and away from the current. So as that current slides down and runs into those little points, it kind of hits them and it bumps them out off of them and diverts the water kind of off. And that stuff is great. I like these little seams and I like the current and stuff that you get playing around here. But what I really like is the areas just below that I've got the red X here focused on. And it kind of creates almost these little kind of rocky flats just below there. And they seem to be super, super fishy spots. Generally, as we're looking at this, you're going to want to kind of position yourself up and outside so that you're not casting your line across all these different current seams coming across here. You're going to have a heck of a time keeping that fly where you want it. So get down here where those seams all kind of come together and you're going to have a longer, maybe more perpendicular shot into spots like this. But great, for dragging an intermediate minnow through, great for fishing a topwater bug in those types of spots. But, obviously, as the water level goes down or up in a river system, you're going to get, a lot of different hydrology changes and stuff. And those are always kind of worth looking at. This one, I almost felt silly listing on here. A riverbank or any kind of undercut bank, is focused on this type of spot here. I prefer to fish these out of a boat because you can get a nice long drift, kind of down the line, but they also can be effectively fished on foot. And really just about any flyer technique can work well here. I like to start on the surface and go from there. A lot of my clients, a lot of smallmouth anglers, a lot of fly anglers in general prefer to fish topwater. So again, generally I'll approach these with a popper, some type of terrestrial. Great spots for frogs. Any type of place you've got an undercut bank that, that frog can get a little lazy, have a mishap, fall into the water. So great opportunity to fish your diving frogs there. And again, these are often, again, going back to stacking elements, stacking variables, these are going to be accompanied by, roots and logs and boulders and stuff underneath there as well. And again, you're going to want to learn these when the river is low. And really the best ones, the ones that you're going to want to concentrate on are the ones that are still undercut even when the river is really, really low. A lot of the sections that we float down, by the time we get into the third week of July and really on through the rest of the season, you can see undercuts everywhere. They're absolutely, you can't go 400 or 500 yards on most of the rivers without seeing an area where there was an undercut when the river was high. But the ones that still hold enough water when the river is low are the ones that you're really going to want to learn and concentrate on. And this fish right here, this is a kind of a cool spot, cool slide, but you can see the undercut in the background here that runs all the way down. And the boat, if you can kind of pick up right here in front of me, the boat is sitting in literally like 5 inches of water. It's just sitting on a sandbar right there. And there's a deep undercut over there along that bank. And I knew that there was a fish here because I'd caught it before, we've hooked it before, but it was always in a little bit different spot. Again, they're kind of cruising up and down and looking for whatever, food, water temperature. So we dropped the anchor right here in the spot and we watched for probably a good 8 to 10 minutes. And then we finally saw the fish sliding in and out off that pink arrow right there. You can see that log that's submerged. That log is actually about 3 feet off the bank. And we saw that fish sliding back and forth between the undercut bank and out to that log. Fortunately, I was lucky enough to have a great caster in the boat that day with a good set of fish eyes on him. And, he made the cast, let the thing drift, twitched the bug a little bit when it got right to that log down there, and the fish snatched it immediately. Ended up being a fish that was, right in that 20-inch range. But again, by being patient and watching these spots, especially when the water's low, we were able to, take advantage of what we could see and get the fly to actually eat the fish. Become a lumberjack. Learn where the wood is, both above and below the surface. Early in the season, we tend to find fish relating a little bit more to rock and those rocky bottoms. Again, they're going to stage their pre-spawn, post-spawn. But later in the season, I end up finding a ton of fish on and relating to timber, both the stuff that you can see above and below the water surface. I generally prefer the older, kind of more established timber and logs over, say, like a green treetop that's just fallen in the river after a storm or something like that. And those are oftentimes spots that guys see and really want to get a fly into. But truthfully, that kind of older, more established stuff that's been in the water for a while. Again, we have a bunch of this stuff in our local rivers that was caught 100 years ago, and a lot of it sank and is still being used year after year by our smallmouth. On the outside bend of this particular slide, this I showed a little bit earlier, but you can see the logs and stuff that are hung up over here along the bank. There's actually some new growth that's coming off the top of these old logs. That's the stuff that everybody's eyes would go to for, again, stacking elements here, a number of reasons. You've got the wood, but you can also see that deeper outside bend out there. But for some reason, that log right there, every single year, there are 2 or 3 fish every time I go down this piece of water on that log right there. And, lighting is often tricky by the time of the day we get to this spot. So it's kind of hard from where the boat is positioned for anglers to see that log. But I don't know what it is about it. But again, it doesn't take much. There's not much else around here. This is a bigger area than it looks like. From the bank out to the edge of this drop off is probably, it's a lot farther than it looks. I'm going to say probably 80 feet maybe. So maybe it's just that one little piece of cover right there is all that they need. Certainly this tall bankside grass over here has a lot of dragon and damselfly life going on around it, and that might be why those fish are there. But learn where those big old logs are and stuff like that, and you'll find fish on them time after time. Some of these areas, depending on the size of the log jam, here's obviously an exceptional sized one. You'll want to work them pretty thoroughly from top to bottom, always bearing in mind that the fish are oftentimes cruising up and down them. So you might make a cast, at a fairly decent range in front of a cruising fish, but if it's a streamer and you strip it back out, by the time you make that next cast that you've placed now down the stream a little bit, you're now casting behind that fish. So in a situation like this, these two guys have been lifelong smallmouth fishing partners, and I got out of the boat and took advantage of the beautiful scene that I was watching unfold here. I didn't have to tell these guys what to do. They just had been in these situations enough that they knew what to do. The guy in the back took his turn working from top to bottom with one type of fly. Then the guy in the front of the boat put a different type of fly on, worked it from top to bottom. And, I think we took 7 or 8 fish out of this spot. Nothing particularly large that day, but just, really work these spots thoroughly and let the water depth along these wood areas kind of dictate the fly you choose. If it's deeper, I like a frog diver, swimming bait fish, a topwater bug, something like that can get their attention a little bit, as opposed to if it's low, moving to some type of, more subtle fly. Again, the fish are going to try like hell when they are hooked in those spots to get back into them. So here's a pretty simple and obvious one, but I always have to mention it when talking about low water and really any type of fish. And that is, stay low, be stealthy, be discreet. Any of you that are familiar with fishing our spring creeks and stuff, again, are familiar with this. If you're in a boat, you may have to get out of the boat and approach on foot, which is what we did in this slide here. If you are on foot, you may have to stay low, false cast away from fish when walking the riverbed. Here's a little one that is new to some people. Avoid the areas with a stone bottom. If you've ever snorkeled like in Door County or something like that, areas where they have like a rocky shoreline, you can hear people walking on that rocky river bottom, and it's, relatively speaking, super loud. So try to find areas where it's sandy or softer, walk across in those spots, again, downstream. You don't want to walk across a sandy, silty area above where you want to fish. Make your cast up and across or perpendicular so that you're not positioned right above the fish all the time, and try to avoid lining the fish. That's, again, kind of a simple one, but by observing and looking for a little bit and kind of plotting out where that cast is going to go, you can hopefully avoid that. I hear a lot of my clients and a lot of smallmouth anglers say, they're not as picky as trout. And I am calling 98% BS on that. A 10 to 20-year-old native river smallmouth, is not dumb. And you'll find that out when the water is low and clear. They can be every bit as frustrating or more, finicky than even a spring creek trout. So use stealth, use that stuff to your advantage. Another little tip is try to get that elevated position to learn a little bit more about the low water areas that you're going to fish. Here, the guys are standing on coolers in the boat. I've stood on everything from boat seats to boat decks. I've crawled up on high banks. I've overhanging trees. I've done that to get a better look of, at what's in a pool or in a little cut or something like that when the river's really low. Whatever I can find. When I fish Door County, like out on the up on the flats or whatever, I like to get up on a big boulder, and crawl up on top of that sucker. Even if it's just a couple feet higher, it's amazing how much more you can see. And if you can't get yourself up a little bit, use a drone. And I know that this for some of you is completely probably out of the realm. I've got a couple of my clients that just absolutely despise technology. So the thought of using a drone to locate fish is maddening. There's no way that would ever happen. But it's crazy what you can learn getting these aerial shots like this. And a lot of the times Google Earth won't allow you to zoom in quite enough. You kind of get to that certain range with Google Earth where things start to look really grainy. So I've found stuff flying drones over stretches that I guide that, in 10 or 15 years of floating, I had never seen before. And just as kind of an example here in this shot, again, current moving where the arrow is dictating right there. The first one is this little slip current that kind of slides in behind this island. And when you actually look at this as we're floating down the river, you don't see that. When you look across the face of this thing from that lower angle, we'd be way out here. You don't really see this current happening until you get kind of down here and below it. And I've actually seen fish chasing bait fish along that seam in there, and once I got an elevated position, I kind of learned why they were back there. The kind of scour hole that you see here behind the island, again, this has just been kind of carved out by years of current coming out and around there. Next one is just, again, kind of a weird hole right behind the island, right there. This island I've used a bunch. It's on a piece of river that I guide frequently, and we would take lunch here all the time. This is a big island over here behind us, and this is kind of just a little island that pops off of it. As we would pull up and stop the boat, just upstream here, just off to the edge, we'd go to walk across this little gravel island. That's me right there running the drone. And that's my clients in the boat wondering what the hell I'm doing. But we'd go walk across this little gravel island, and I'd always see fish wake out of this area. And they'd wake either down to here, or they'd spook and run this way, or they'd spook and run this way. And I never really realized, I guess I never really took the time to look, but you can see that deeper little bowl right there. And that's exactly where those fish were sitting. And then the last one is just the channel that's cut by the current. As that current comes down, bumps off, and you can see where this channel is carved off right here, that little bit deeper line right there. So there's a ton that you can learn, from getting a drone up in the air and getting this, completely different perspective on a piece of water that you fish. You'll want to get footage and shots if you do utilize this from different angles. And, you can certainly ask other people that own a drone to come out and get this footage for you if you want. Better, situation than this is to shoot on low light days. You can actually see in that last slide that was taken on a pretty low light day. And you can see a lot more detail in the river and stuff here than you can in this one, just because of the glare and stuff on the water. So if you do go to this, just my little PSA that I have to throw out there, just, make sure that where you're flying is legal and just stay away from other anglers, and, it shouldn't be a problem, but great learning resource for that. You'll definitely want to take some kind of perspective when you're studying these shots later on, take some landmarks and stuff like that so that you can translate, what you've learned to, when you actually do get down on that lower angle on the water to where some of those changes and some of those goodies were. So moving into flies here, we don't have a whole lot left, but moving into some of the flies that I like to use when we do have these super low water situations, I'll start off with the flies that we call the wigglies. In short, wigglies are kind of a family of flies that really is just a lightweight. They can be foam, balsa, cork, anything like that. And I know a guy that makes them out of like the foam rubber from sandals. anything that, is made out of that has a low profile and long rubber legs. In low water, fish are more likely to be spooky and skittish. That's pretty obvious. And we don't want or need a bug that makes a lot of noise or a big splash when it lands. So with these, we're just relying on the attraction to that more subtle movement provided by the rubber legs. And they do make just enough noise. And these things just drive fish crazy. I'll make the switch generally from poppers to, chuggers and divers and sliders. And this actually is a popper head here that I turned around on the hook shank to make it into more of a diver type fly there. But Tim has a great line, and that's that poppers explode the water surface and divers implode. So just a lot less likely to spook those kind of skittish fish. We don't need a ton of noise, but having a fly that they can just kind of slip through or just under the water surface, will make just enough noise to attract a bass. We've got a few clients that still crush fish on old school Sneaky Pete's and little bullet sliders and stuff like that. I mean, the things have rusty hooks and they're held together by Zap-A-Gap or whatever, but the fish still eat them. The fish still love them. Remember to keep your flies lightweight, consider profile. I like a fly that kind of hits multiple shots at once. I like it when a fish, or when I perceive a fish is going to look up at a fly and kind of wonder, like, is that a wounded bait fish? Is it, some kind of bug, whatever it is, but just make it something that looks foody and interesting enough. And, I'm convinced that smallmouth are equal parts aggressive and curious. So anything that looks kind of buggy, kind of foody, kind of fishy, whatever, you should have quite a bit of success with it. So low water on our river also coincides with the time of the year that we start seeing some of our big insect residents, big stone flies, hex flies, Dobson flies, cicada, so on and so on. Be ready to precisely imitate these. Most of the time, the same rules apply for smallmouth as they do for trout. Get the size right if you, or pretty close to it if you can. Get the profile close. And if you can match the color, great. Kind of work in that order. And if you can observe how the naturals are acting on the water, that's ideal. A lot of these big bugs, if they do find themselves tumbling or falling onto the water surface, they'll kind of hit and get stuck in that water tension and then struggle a little bit and then take a rest. And then struggle a little bit and then take a rest. And that's the same kind of approach that you want to have when fishing these types of bugs. And of course, you're absolutely doing yourself a disservice if you go into a smallmouth stream and don't have some dragon and damselfly imitations. These things can turn even the most finicky fish into eaters, and they're just absolutely a blast to fish. I like this gorilla style, Whitlock gorilla style damsel. It's kind of hard to see against that white background, but it's got some crystal splash or flash as the wings here. Oftentimes I like to put a little cider on the top of these because they do kind of sit low on the water surface, which is great. That's what you want. But they can be a little bit tricky to see, if you cast them out a fair distance. So, and again, this can be an awesome time to kind of go back to those unweighted minnows like we discussed earlier in the show. Fish in low water won't often venture too far from where they're hiding. So I like these types of flies, these streamers, to hit the water running. I tell clients to immediately remind the fish that the fly is alive, but don't take it away from them. So when that fly splats down on the water, that fish turns and looks at it. I want that fly to kind of kick a couple times in the water, make it look alive, make it look like it's about ready to escape, but then just kind of hang and drift and just kind of repeat that a couple times and try to draw those fish. But again, remember, they might not come 20 feet out from a log jam or from, one of those transition areas, especially in high sun, if they're wary of eagles, ospreys, things like that. So gurglers, stealth bombers, and foam spiders are way underutilized. This has been kind of one of my favorite types of fly to fish the last couple of years. You can find the foam cutters for these things at, any fly shop. You can find them online and just go nuts with your creativity with these things. They're super, super fun to fish. They really kind of combine a whole bunch of different aspects. They do make some noise. They kind of dive a little bit. This fly here is called a stealth bomber. And for those of you that don't know, this is an old school. It started in the South as a bluegill fly. Thankfully, they make the cutters and hooks now bigger so we can use them for smallmouth. But the whole thought process with this is that this folded piece of foam that you see, when you pull this thing underwater and this head dives, that water gets sucked in by a vacuum on either side of that and creates a really neat little bubble trail. So it's a super, super cool fly, great for low water. It lands nice and gentle, and just, again, a very foodie looking fly. It looks like a lot of things that a smallmouth might eat. The wigglies and foam bugs, that we love to use are not only super easy to tie, but they're fun to tie and they're fun to fish. I do like to stick to a medium weight hook on these, just enough to keel the fly and kind of get it riding the correct way on the water, but not so much that, it doesn't sit high in the water. You want it to be up a little bit visible. You can see on these ones, I've actually put a little piece of, this is the material that you can make parachute posts out of for dry flies. So it's already pre-treated to be, I believe the term is hydrophobic, but it'll help it to float, make it a little bit easier to see. So yeah, great type of fly. And if you do, want to fish with poppers when the water's low, that's perfectly great. But try to really adhere to the whole less is more mindset. If you encounter the combination of low water and a little chop on the wind, a popper can be the ticket. That little bit of surface disturbance might make more subtle flies a little trickier to find, but sticking with a popper can be, a great thing. This particular fish here came up right up to my angler's popper and drifted with it for probably 3 minutes, which when you're looking at a good sized fish right underneath your popper felt like about 45 minutes. And I know that if you'd have made a loud pop with this, that fish would have turned and burned and been out of there. But he stuck with it. He listened well and just kind of wiggled that fly just enough, that popper, just to kind of bend those rubber legs and get that little bit of wiggle out of it. We don't want to pop it. And eventually that fish came up and sipped the fly in. So, and if you do like to fish, the popping type bugs when the water's low, it's hard to beat the old school type of bugs. They generally ride a little bit lower in the water because they're made out of some type of older cork or balsa. They're a little bit heavier than like the super lightweight foams and stuff like that. They're generally smaller. They're a little bit more subtly colored, and they don't have quite as deeply of a cupped face. This is a fly that we have at Tight Lines that I think I've got about 3 dozen of them now, and I probably wouldn't sell them for anything. But just a fantastic option for low water and a little bit more skittish fish. And keep in mind, one thing that always bears mentioning, when talking about low water smallmouth is that, a river smallmouth hooked in this skinny water is going to be a different fight than one hooked, in deeper water. I like to give the boxing phrase to my clients, stick and move. Meaning, give that fish a good hook set and be ready to move with or against the fish. Be prepared to strip line, clear line, steer the fish with the rod away from the cover. A lot of the times they're going to fight like hell to try to get back into that cover. So, you're going to break fish off, and that's okay. You may even break a rod. I've had that happen enough on smallmouth trying to steer them out of cover, but do whatever you have to do to control the fish, land it safely, and release it as unstretched as possible. Because again, generally going to have warmer water. So a lot of the times they love to jump. Obviously, as you've seen in the last couple of slides. Another one that's tricky that is oftentimes encountered, especially when we're out of the boat and the boat is positioned in deeper water, is that these fish will run right at you. So we don't fight the fish off the reel. We're making big, long strips as long as our arms will go to try to keep good tension on that fish. A lot of fish instinctually will run away from you. And, these fish have a tendency a lot of times to run right at you. I'm also convinced, and this may not be sound, but I'm also convinced that sometimes they run right at you because they don't know where the hell you are. And we think that fish can decipher what direction it's being pulled on and stuff. And I don't know in that moment, in that first couple seconds, if that fish really knows that. And I think sometimes they just accidentally, randomly end up running right at you. So one of the last slides that I'm going to show you tonight is, just getting back to what I talked about earlier, guys, and really trying to stack as many elements and variables as possible. And this little spot right here is a great example of that. No, I will not send you the GPS coordinates to this. You'll have to come out and spend a day in the boat with me, I guess, if you want to see this spot. But I found this spot about 3 years ago. And, I'd always caught fish generally off of this bank. It was probably 40 or 50 yards long. But as we approached this spot, we saw a couple wakes, which was not uncommon. And a little bit later, a well-placed cast, and we had a fish on, and we released the fish, and with the anchor down, noticed that, all of a sudden my client says, "Hey, is that another one in there?" And I looked, and all of a sudden we're kind of staring at this spot, and there's a little bit of glare. You can see that green glare coming off, and it's like, holy smokes. And we started counting, and we saw that there was one, there's another one there, 2, 3, there's number 4 back there. There's number 5 tucked up underneath. There's number 6 just coming into the screen right there. Number 7 right there. And that was just what we could see at once with a polarized filter on my camera. And I would say at any given time in this spot, which was maybe 12 feet by 5 feet, there were a dozen fish or more that were hanging out in this spot. So after we fished it enough and, kind of got what we wanted out of it and had just a hoot, I slid the boat in there and we started counting the variables that were there that made this spot good. And it was crazy when we really started to look at it. You've got back in behind this willow brush, there's a number of seepage springs along the bank there that are bringing in a little bit cooler water. There's overhead cover from a big tree that you can't see in this shot. It's adjacent to deep water, just a few feet out from this last fish out here, is water that's probably 4 feet deep. There's a grass line in there. And for some reason, this this willow brush right here on the bank is always full of dragon and damselflies. So, there's so much going on here in this spot. And again, if you put your time in these low water situations and find as many of these spots as you can like this that stack a bunch of this stuff together, you're going to have a ton of success. So again, I wish I had more time tonight to discuss some of the other conditions that we face as anglers, but that'll have to wait for another time. And in all honesty, when I really started looking at it, a lot of the things that I discussed tonight can be applied to most of those other conditions. Some of the stuff that I look for, some of the tricks that we use in low water are for the most part the same stuff that we'd use on like a pressured river system or a river that sees a lot of boat traffic or something where, the fish are just inherently a little bit more spooky. The flies and tactics and techniques that I'd use in high water are generally the same as I'd use in off-colored water or, on a really dark sky day or in low light. So hopefully some of these techniques will help you on your home waters, turn kind of a tough day into an epic day. So again, thanks for joining me tonight. I'm going to try to exit out of this full screen here in a moment without losing the entire group and getting myself out of this thing. So thanks for sticking in there. And again, if you have any questions, I'll leave this slide up here for just a little bit. But my email's up there, my Instagram, shoot me a text or call me on my cell at some point if you want to discuss any of these things. And thanks for joining.
All right, Nate, thank you so much for that. The last message that came through was from Tommy Trout, and he said, "Thank you, Nate. Great presentation. I think I and everybody else here agrees that that was a fantastic presentation."
Thank you.
I wasn't there for the beginning, like I said, so if you answered this, I apologize. What is your success rate on large fish and subsurface flies? Do you tend to catch your large fish on top water, or do you not find that either one is more successful?
I would say that the majority of our fish in a season, I'm going to try to get back onto video mode there. There we go. The majority of our fish in a season do come on smaller flies, and a lot of them are on top water. We do get some really big fish early in the season on streamers, but that's mostly because we're not fishing top water. And I'm not sure really why that is. A lot of the top water stuff that we fish is not a specific imitation. Again, it's just kind of that generic kind of foodie look to it. And maybe it's just that they are more curious than we like to give them credit for, when they see the same food item day after day after day. And, one of the things that I tell people all the time is that, when I tell them that, for example, on our river, 97% of the fish's diet is crayfish. And people go, "Oh my gosh, why the hell aren't we fishing a crayfish fly, or a crayfish imitation?" And my answer for that is real simple. And that's, number one, they're a pain in the butt to fish. They end up snagged on the bottom a lot. They end up hung up a lot. Any of you that have fished them know that. Most of them are weighted. I have gone to fishing actually more of an unweighted kind of a fleeing or swimming crayfish type pattern with a fair bit of success. But number two, from a biological standpoint, if you start turning over rocks and stones in a river, you will find crayfish that are teeny, teeny, tiny. Obviously, they all start from an egg and they grow up. So from the time those smallmouth were little fish, they have been watching those crayfish. They've been learning how they swim, how they move, how they flee, where they're at in their molting cycle, stuff like that. So I think that trying to imitate something that takes up such a big percentage of a fish's diet can oftentimes be very, very challenging. So I think the surface type imitations that again are more kind of a general imitator than a specific imitator are for some reason maybe just more appealing to them.
Speaking of crayfish, if you had to fish a deep crayfish, what are your favorite patterns for that?
One of my absolute favorites is still Whitlock's near enough crayfish. And it's a pain in the butt to tie, because any of you that have seen Dave's art or seen any of his stuff, he doesn't do anything, halfway. Everything is very detailed and very, very fancy. So I like Whitlock's near enough. And honestly, the Menominee Mudbug is probably, 1A, 1B to that. It's a great smallmouth or crayfish rather imitation in kind of the olive or the rust colors. The way it sits on the river bottom is absolutely fantastic. And that jig style fly that I showed earlier in the presentation is, another one that, again, by putting just a little bit of floatant on the end of that bunny strip so that jig head sits on the bottom and that bunny strip sits up, it looks like a crayfish in that, semi-defensive pose.
I'm just curious, have you ever tried putting that jig hook on the near enough?
I haven't, no. I'm sure that it would absolutely work fantastic though.
Would it help with the its ability to not snag on the bottom as much, you think?
I don't
Or is
think
that just
so.
a function of weight?
I think it's a function of weight. And I think like on a lot of our, like the upper Wisconsin and the Menominee and parts of the Oconto, the bigger problem that we run into than actually hooking things and snagging them is actually wedging. So you're hopping that thing along the bottom, it comes to two rocks and it just kind of gets wedged in there. And whether you're wading or in a boat, a lot of times that's just as simple as positioning yourself on the other side of it, giving a pop with the rod tip and it comes free. But, I think on a smaller gravel bottom or something, I'd be really interested in seeing what a jig style hook would do on a near enough crayfish. I think it'd be really neat.
I don't know. Have you ever used Chuck Craft's Clawdad?
Yeah, I have. Yep, that's another great one. We used to get a lot of CK's flies in the shop. We still get the CK bait fish. The clawdad we had for a little while, but that's a great one as well. One of the things that I've noticed is just I think sometimes we have a tendency to overthink what a smallmouth is looking for in a crayfish imitation and get almost over the top specific. I mean, I've seen guys that do. And I think some of it is boredom, some of it is creativity, but I've seen guys that actually do not only the claws, but they actually separate the pinchers out, and do the orange, and they're beautiful. They're awesome. It's just, I personally, when I throw that, if I lost it in the rocks, I would want to vomit. I would just be sick to my stomach because I wouldn't want to lose such a beautiful imitation. And a lot of the times, like that mudbug type fly, like I don't think Nelson tied that to specifically look like a crayfish, but it does a fantastic job.
5 minutes.
I wanted to ask about so streamers. Have you ever used the fish mask?
I have, yeah, and they're great. You're talking about the plastic one?
Yeah, the plastic that's just like from the nose, just behind the eyes. Yep.
Yeah, and I like those for a number of reasons, Nate. One is that little bit of extra weight that plastic affords can help with kind of that neutral buoyancy of that fly, especially if you have some materials in there like, a deer hair or anything like that, or just really densely wound, chenilles or any kind of a braid or estaz like that. Sometimes that can kind of slow down the descent of that. Those fish masks do, carry a little bit of weight to them, especially once you get a little bit of epoxy on them. But I do really also like them for the eyes. They have that really nice recessed area in them, and you can dump that little bit of epoxy over them, and it does finish the fly very nicely and make a nice looking streamer.
Hey, as we're wrapping up, a couple of shout outs. Number one, Nate, thanks so much for joining us tonight. And thanks for everything you and the Tight Lines crew do. And and everything you do for TU with Shopaka and everything else. But if you guys haven't seen, I think there's been some recent podcasts that Tim has done from the shop at Tight Lines. So if you're interested in learning a little more from a podcast perspective, there's I think he was with Destination Angler. I think Wet Fly Podcast was another one. And then Tom Rosenbauer, who does the Orvis Fly Fishing Podcast, had Tim on there. So there's lots of other resources out there. And then if you haven't checked out the book, I don't remember, it's like Smallmouth Tactics, Methods, and you probably know the title better than I do, Nate. But
I don't.
you don't.
But I think you're on the right track there.
Yeah, but the whole team at Tight Lines has put together an awesome smallmouth book, which the Tight Lines group has been fishing the Menominee for 21 years, I believe it is now.
Yeah.
And Nate's been there for 15. I think Bart's been there since the beginning with Tim, and so there's lots of resources out there, but go check out the book. It's got lots of great information, and I will personally vouch that Nate is an awesome guide. I've fished with Nate now for 5 years, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I take my daughter out almost every year with Nate. We have a blast. And I think that was a picture of Quiver Falls earlier on.
Yep, one of them was.
We did that one last year.
Yep.
And had a hoot watching Nate pump the boat out at the bottom of the falls, even though it was relatively calm when we went through.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to go out with Tight Lines, I highly recommend the group. I highly recommend going out with Nate. These guys, there we go. We've got the smallmouth book right there.
Yeah, I can't read it that way, but maybe you guys can.
Modern, let's see, smallmouth, modern fly fishing methods, tactics, and techniques.
There you go.
Nice.
And if you're really good, you can go to the shop and get some, or go up to Pembine to the guide hangout and get everybody to sign the book for you. But yeah, I highly recommend going out with these guys. They really know what they're doing. And I have my 20-inch Tight Lines hat, got my 20 and a quarter-inch smallie. So
What tape measure were you using? Did it have like the first 3
No,
inches cut off, or?
no, certified by my guide.
It was legit. It was legit.
It was legit. Certified.
I still get a lot of hell from one of my longest standing clients. It's a husband-wife team that have fished with me for, this will be 16 years now. And I still get crap from the husband because the first year that they fished with me, the wife caught fish that they claim were 19 and 17/18, 19 and 7/8, and 19 and whatever else, 19, whatever. And it's, yeah, I mean, it's got to be 20. So,
Well, no, I'll vouch for it because I've had 2 or 3 in that like 19 5/8. I mean, all up in that top range. And it's like, no, Scrooge McSipple here will not give you a hat unless he measures it up. And
that's right. Can't cheapen
lots
it.
of fun. So thanks a lot, Nate, for spending time with us this evening.
Absolutely. Anytime, guys.
Yeah, on that, I think we'll wrap things up. Those of you that got in on the auction, I will, or the raffle, I'll get a hold of you. Congratulations to the winner, Roger, who's I think checked out already. But look forward to seeing some of you guys next month too. Third Thursday of the month, we have a chapter meeting. Next one's on the big mayflies, like you seen earlier. And going to Tight Lines and ask for Nate for a guide. I mean, you won't be disappointed for sure.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Take care. If anybody else got something to say it now, or we're ending the meeting.
Thank you guys again. Appreciate it.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, Nate. Thanks, Nate. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a good night.